There's already so many roadblocks that we don't have control over that can kind of get thrown into your path. Control the controllables, man, and get done what you can get done. Get comfortable in your own head. I can't tell you how peaceful it is to be okay with who I am, the decisions I've made, and being able to think freely without all of these distractions, without music on, without a podcast on, and be within my own thoughts and not be full of anxiety while in my own thoughts. I feel as though a lot of physical things from the outside viewed inside are seen as just exertion and grit and different things like that. But there's so much mental technique and understanding body movements and how to do things efficiently and understanding things to a deeper level that allow you to make much larger jumps in progression than otherwise possible. Behind every movement that we make, whether it's in jiu-jitsu or in business or in school, whatever we're doing, whatever field that we're navigating, every move that we make, when done with intention, moves you much further than if it was just a sporadic, chaotic movement. Pursuing something that you feel as though is greater than you allows the smaller things to be much more simplistic, and you become a lot less, you complain a lot less, you become a lot more grateful for the things around you. Yeah. So widening your perspective, I think, is a super good idea as well, and realize how much you have to be grateful for, because we take advantage of a lot and take a lot for granted. And I feel like sometimes people need a kick in the ass too, when they're in the crap of things. You're complaining about simple things. Sometimes a kick in the ass will get you going too.
All right, Cory, why do you think people conform to beliefs that they actually don't believe in? Like, they stick to their own ideologies, and when they have a conversation with someone, say it could be for anything, it could be religion, it could be politics, right, whatever. We were talking about that before this. Why do you think that is, though? Do you think it's tribalism of they're scared to get excommunicated out of their tribe for stating what they really think against towards their own ideology? Or do you think it's people are scared to be just vulnerable?
I think that it's a few things. The idea of tribalism, I understand. I think, though, it's more the fear of confrontation and possibly that person's understanding that they lack an actual understanding of what they believe. Let me clarify. In terms of the tribalism aspect, I can see where that plays a factor. However, when we're talking about issues, whether it's religion or politics, etc., there are tribes on both sides regardless. So I think that the fear of being expelled from one tribe can be overcome with the idea that you had this other tribe to go to. I think that tribalism definitely plays a factor if you're already a part of one group and you want to stay identified with that group, and fear of expulsion from that group leaves you in some identity crisis or something like that. I can see that for sure. But I think more so it's the fear of that confrontation, because I think a lot of people have a very difficult time sitting down and having conversations like this, whether or not they agree or disagree with the other person, and actually coming to some sort of resolve, or just actually listening to the other person versus having to throw out their ideas all the time and to be heard. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Is it because they're scared to shatter their own identity, which they pretty much made their reality? Is it that really that hard to face, though, to actually listen, just to listen to someone, maybe get a few ideas and not go outraged because you disagree with that person?
Yeah. I personally don't think that it's that difficult, but I think that the factor that makes it easier for me versus other people possibly is the fact that I've done a lot of time thinking and diving deep into the beliefs that I have as a person and as a man, and understand why I believe them. I think that a lot of, especially my generation today, I think is guilty of it more than anyone else, is they see these other ideas that other people are projecting, and rather than going through and actually understanding them to their depths, they just accept them at face value because it's super easy to do. You click on social media and then someone's saying this thing about this person. It's much easier to accept what they're saying and be like, oh, wow, that's crazy. I didn't know that. versus diving into whether or not that's actually true. I think that's the biggest issue with social media nowadays is it allows for people to defame others without actually having to provide any evidence or credit as to why it's true. And that's what leads to people accepting all of these ideas. So then when other people question them on those ideas, they don't have the ability to facilitate why they actually believe it. They just chose to adopt the belief regardless.
Yeah, I think speaking of your generation, it's easy to, you hear it all the time because it's easy to pick on it, right? It's like the Gen Z generation. It's like all they do is go on, social media. But in a way, it's kind of true. Honestly, a part of the reason why you're here is that because it is now a rarity, right? For someone like you to be disciplined and to be able to think on their own. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the problem is that I think people are just lazy thinkers. I don't know so much if they're against the grain, if it's, there's the hard conversations, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to think things through. But I think just thinking about it in general, they're just kind of like, oh, my brain hurts. You know what I mean? Yeah. Or I'm bored of this shit. Let me stimulate my brain
for sure
into, social media and then not get bored thinking. So back to my first question, what were you saying about why you think the three things why people it's hard for people to accept, other people's way of thinking. We were talking about like the three traits before this podcast, like maybe people are scared or people are projecting their own securities about themselves on you. That's why they won't listen, or they'll just go on a tirade and be like, you're wrong, and all that shit.
Yeah, I think it really does the identity thing is what you're talking about, right? Like the identity that you have the way that you perceive yourself, the way that others perceive you, and the way that you actually are, right? I think that comes into play a lot. So I guess I can just go into a background story. Growing up in Detroit, I have the friends that I made there, right? Through elementary, all the way through middle school, up until my freshman year of high school, I had this specific group of friends. And, you're young and with your buddies, and you're like, oh, we're going to go do all these awesome things when we're older, and we're going to do them together and different things like that. So growing up and developing those relationships with those people, I had them in a box, right, of all of the things that I knew about them and the ideas that we communicated together and that we wanted to do in the future. And they had me in a box, right? And then after my freshman year of high school, I ended up moving to a different school, and then I ended up coming out to Vegas, and I started this journey, right, of jiu-jitsu and working out and all of this self-discipline stuff. And I still go back out to Michigan 2-3 times a year to visit two of my buddies. But when I go back and I see my regular high school friends, I would call them acquaintances now because we're not super close, but you can see the separation now where I'm in an entirely different realm of reality than they are just because of small decisions that I made and stayed consistent with. So it's a weird dynamic now because I'm in the way that they knew me and the ideas that they had about me are completely different. I'm a completely changed man. I'm completely different now. So the level of conversation that we can have now versus then when we were on the same playing field is astronomically different.
Yeah. Can you give me something? I'm sure, and still being so young, it's kind of crazy to have those thoughts. Yeah. Those thoughts that you just said, that certain self-awareness. Yeah. Especially being that young. I mean, for me, I think I was eating ants or something. I know, 17 or something. Yeah, but to have that level of awareness. Can you give me an example of what you just said? Like, how were you and your friends in Michigan, right? I'm sure you guys were young, doing kid things and 100%. All that. And then when you moved to Vegas, can you take me through that on when you actually had the realization and, when you started getting that kind of epiphany?
Yeah, 100%. It was the first summer that I went back to Michigan after starting jiu-jitsu was the biggest thing, because I think jiu-jitsu, the goals that I had as a young man definitely put me on the path that I'm on. But starting jiu-jitsu is what sort of set that idea of discipline and consistency into reality, because it demonstrated for me how quickly I can succeed at different things, or how much of a difference it makes being consistent versus just showing up when I feel like it, So I started jiu-jitsu the summer after I started jiu-jitsu, and I went back to Michigan as a blue belt. the environment that it put me in the gym, being surrounded by people like you and Jerry and everyone else, people that are a decade or more older than I am, and being able to learn from them, I think that's what separated me. Because when I went back, I had all of these cool ideas that I wanted to discuss, and I was learning more about the world because I was talking to people with real world experience. And then I go back and I talk to the friends that I had in Michigan, and they're still talking about, you know, their girlfriend cheated on them last week, or they started a throuple, or, yo, let's go to this party this weekend. We're going to go jump off the bridge this weekend, you know? Their mindset is still stuck in that hedonistic short term, how can I get as much pleasure out of my life right this second, versus the exposure that I had to the ideas of, cool, if I discipline myself now and enjoy I enjoy what I'm doing right now. I'm super disciplined. I do a bunch of different things that many people might not want to do every day, but I love doing it. And it's setting me up for success in my future and giving me this foundation that I can continue to build off of, versus going back and realizing that they're still just throwing hay bales on the ground and that's what they're building their foundation out of. And then seeing their life crumble because they set their identity in all of this pleasure and this fun. They didn't get invited to a party and now they're depressed for 3 weeks, you know? Yeah. That was when I realized that I didn't relate to my generation as much as I do to someone like Jerry or you guys, you know?
So I'm going to double back take on that and say, even before that, see, again, that level of awareness is crazy because something have had to happen, and I'm pretty sure it's how you were raised. Possibly it's kind of like, you'll say, that's when I started realizing it. But Jesus Christ, like most people, even at that age, you were probably like 16 at that time, honestly, right? If we were to really go back to even think about that, it's kind of like, my friends aren't really at the age of 15. Like that's a lot of people. Because most kids will think like that, right? That's why it's not so much that I'm looking at it as in like, I don't know so much if your friends, I think they're just being who they are, as a child, or as someone that's growing up in this world. Talking about girlfriends and boyfriends, whatever, going through the motions of being a teenager. But where do you think the root cause of like being that, again, self-aware, like, was it from your parents? How did you grow up into thinking all these things?
Yep, you're definitely in the right trail. I definitely would say that I had to grow up a lot faster than most people because
it's almost like you're the weird one.
I know.
Let's not put this on your friends.
I'll take it 100%. I'll take that for sure. Yeah. So thinking about that and then hearing it like that, I had to grow up a lot faster than I would have liked to because of certain things that my parents had to deal with growing up. So quick story. I don't want to dive too deep into it because it's a lot,
Yep.
But let's say around the age of 10, 11, or 12, when my current brother, who's 11 now, so I was 10 at the time when he was born, my mother ended up having to go in and get like an emergency C-section and a bunch of different things like that, and ended up from that getting addicted to pharmaceuticals and kind of sent the family into this crazy spiral where, how everyone goes through a midlife crisis. I haven't had to go through anything like that, but it's a common phrase that people understand.
Absolutely, yeah.
People
I've talked about it in this podcast, yeah, for
people
sure.
with much more experience than me, and people get these crazy changes in their life, and navigating that, I think especially with children, is super difficult. So basically, my family had that at the years where I started to like develop socially, I would say. So from 10 to 16, 17 was like the hellfire of it, a bunch of different things, situations being better, situations being worse. And through that, I had to really navigate quickly on how to take care of my younger siblings. I have an 18-year-old brother and an 11-year-old brother now, as well as a younger sister. At the time, my brother was 3 years younger than me, and my other one was 10 years younger than me. I had to take on this role of, at least in my head, as like a protector over them and sort of protecting them and myself from everything that was going on. So in terms of like where it came from childhood wise, I think that sparked the self-reflection aspect of it because I didn't have the luxury of being upset over simple or silly things because I was more worried about whether or not the house was going to be chaos when I got home.
Yeah, everything's so minuscule after that, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
100%. So yeah, thank you for asking it like that. Because I mean, I've had that thought and epiphany before. It's something that I don't talk about much anymore.
Yeah, it definitely had
Cause that term.
Yeah, because that one was like, okay, well, that's what your initial answer was, saying that, you know, you were like you were different from your friends and you had the different realization. That's honestly something that like a mid 30-year-old would say. You know what I mean? They're like, okay, well, I can't do this shit anymore. I've been like fucking up my life, you know, throughout my 20s. But that comes with a lot of years of like just fucking up. But that's why I had to ask, because at such a young age, it had to come from somewhere. So it's not just like, oh shit, like
I was blessed to have a front row seat of all of that chaos and all of that destruction without actually having to experience it myself, you know?
Right.
And that's, I think, too, one of the big reasons I won't touch alcohol. I won't touch drugs. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just something that I completely avoid for more than one reason. But the largest reason is because I've seen the type of destruction that it brings on a person and the possible destruction that it can bring to a family. Yeah. So I think that realization came to me at a super young age, and that set me already on a different path where it's like, okay, cool. I'm not even going to stress about this stuff, right? It's not even a temptation for me. I want nothing to do with it. And that allowed me to succeed in other ways that other people have to go through and learn it hands-on. I was lucky enough to just get a front row seat to see how chaotic it can be and perceive it as like, okay, cool, I don't want to avoid it. Because there's the other side of things, right? Some person can go through the exact same thing and they perceive it as, oh, I was taken advantage of. Oh, this is chaos. Oh, you guys are disrespectful for doing this for me. And so they hop into the exact same boat that caused all of the chaos to drown out all the pain or drown out all of the lack of love that they may have felt through the entire scenario. I was just blessed to have the perspective on the other end where it's like, no, I just want nothing to do with that. I want to set myself up for success. I want to make sure that I understand how to navigate a family for when I have a wife and kids and navigate my future career and different things like that without any of the extra roadblocks. You know, there's already so many roadblocks that we don't have control over that can kind of get thrown into your path. Mm-hmm. Control the controllables, man, and get done what you can get done.
You know, that's what you hear in a lot of stoicism, you're in philosophy, and sure. That's like the ultimate metacognition, right? Like the reframe is control what you can control, but at sometimes people will kind of go around saying that, but I don't know if they actually knows what it means. I know you do. I mean, you just pretty much explained it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it really is one of those like philosophies in life where I think people got to study it almost.
Yeah.
Because I think that's where people hurt themselves the most. You know, it's like one of those quotes, that stoicism quotes. It's like 90% of like your overthinking and your stress does come from your head.
Oh yeah.
You pretty much fabricate it. You know, you imitate whatever you think you are, your thoughts.
For sure.
And then when you can't control something, you just kind of you get into this victim mindset of like, oh, why is this happening to me and all that. And so I think reframing is like everything.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't think you can hide from problems. You just go through. Like Jordan Peterson, we were talking about him before that, and he said it the best. He was like, man, once you get kind of, I'm rephrasing here or paraphrasing here, but then once you see the path, like the only way out of your misery is through it.
Yeah.
Right? Like
facing
to go through, facing the storm.
Running
There's
from
no,
it, you're just gonna get stuck in it.
Exactly, man. Exactly.
You gotta face it and go through. Yeah, it's unbelievable to me how uncomfortable people are in their own heads, right? And I don't know what the cause of that is, whether it's the same idea as not wanting to confront truth, or just being fearful of losing their identity. But if I can give anybody any advice, it's get comfortable in your own head. I can't tell you how peaceful it is to be okay with who I am, the decisions I've made, and being able to think freely without all of these distractions, without music on, without a podcast on, and be within my own thoughts and not be full of anxiety while in my own thoughts.
Funny enough, you say that because I do listen to, you know, a lot of psychiatrists and all that. And what a lot of people lack nowadays, especially in quote unquote like your generation, is that there's too much stimulation going on.
For sure.
Now, I know you hear that everywhere, it's kind of like, yeah, social media this, social media that, distractions this, porn this, and all that. But yeah, the hardest thing for people to do is sit with themselves for even a good 5-10 minutes. Just sit with themselves, not even meditate. Just kind of like have those thoughts run. But then those thoughts are what we talked about are what they think is killing them. It's kind of like, oh, I can't live with this shit. And I don't know if it's kind of like, I think it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. Their thoughts become self-fulfilling prophecies, and then it just snowballs, right?
Yeah.
It just kind of trickles out from there. Yeah. So relating to that, I wanted to start off with that because now, going into like the jiu-jitsu philosophy of things, right? What do you think drew you into leading up to when you said, you had this big shift change of, doing jiu-jitsu for a minute, you got your blue belt. What do you think what's the biggest change that happened to you when you started training in jits?
It gave me an outlet for everything. So I think, obviously going through what I had to go through and experiencing what I experienced growing up, I wrestled a little bit in middle school. I wrestled a year or so in high school. COVID kind of hit, canceled out my wrestling. So I never really had a good outlet to express everything that I had gone through physically, And I didn't actually realize this myself. It was pointed out to me one of the summers that I went back to Michigan. My buddy Ryan, his mother, Mary Kay, after my first year of training jiu-jitsu and when I went back out to see them, she said that she felt this new aura or less anger out of me that I didn't even realize that I had when I lived in Michigan before jiu-jitsu. So looking back on it now, I think that the best thing that jiu-jitsu did for me in the beginning was give me this way to deal with everything that I hadn't dealt with before through just being physically active and the mental stimulation of talking to all the different people on the mats. And it gave me this new puzzle to figure out. I'm super, I wouldn't say puzzle oriented, but when it comes to something that I get interested in, I'm super extreme with different things. So if something interests me, it's super difficult for me to just learn a little bit about it and then kind of dismiss it. If I really enjoy something or something really fascinates me, I dive headfirst into the deep end right off the bat and learn as much as possible, as quick as possible.
What drew you in? Was it because of wrestling? Because of grappling in general? My
father had trained jiu-jitsu, I think, for like 6 months when I was really young. And I remember him doing it a little bit. So I always knew what jiu-jitsu was. My family watched The Ultimate Fighter a little bit. But my mother specifically never wanted me to do like football or anything like that growing up because she was afraid of the contact sports. She finally let me wrestle, obviously. And then when COVID stopped, we were finally in a good financial spot where I could start jiu-jitsu. So my dad's like, okay, cool, COVID canceled wrestling. Let's go start a jiu-jitsu class. I made him take me to the gym that night because he looked up and he seen
here, not in Michigan, right? Here?
Yeah, here in Vegas. Mm-hmm. They were looking because they wanted to get the younger kids started in jiu-jitsu just because it's a good thing to get them into.
Absolutely.
And he's seen that Roxanne was teaching at Syndicate at the time, and he's seen her on The Ultimate Fighter, and she was running the kids program. So he's like, okay, let's check this gym out. I made him take me that night, and Shane was running the class, and I'm like, I remember wrestling and then blast doubling this kid right into a triangle and then getting caught in these different things, bro. Immediately snapped. I'm like, oh, I got to learn how to do this. There's no way that I'm going through life not knowing this. And of course, listening beforehand to like Jocko's podcast and stuff like that, he emphasized how important he found jiu-jitsu to be, and I wasn't training it at the time. So I was like, this is definitely something that I want to get into.
Bro, you were listening to Jocko's podcast before you went?
Yeah.
Unfucking believable, man. Unbelievable.
I love it. That guy's a gangster.
That's interesting. How big is it to have like a mentor? Because I know, from the outside looking in, how big is it to have pretty much Jerry take you under his wing, right? Because personally, for me, I never really had that mentorship. It was just through books and podcasts and all that. And I'm a late bloomer. Like I wasn't as aware or wise as you were when I was a kid. I mean, I think I got into alcohol when I was like 14,
Right.
honestly. But yeah, how big is it to have a mentor, and what are a few things that kind of really benefited you from, having someone like Jerry not only teach you in jiu-jitsu, but what are some whereabouts about just life in general, disciplines that you learned being under his wing?
Oh my goodness, having a mentor, it's amazing. I couldn't, and I mean, it feels less as like a mentorship now and more as just like an awesome friendship.
Yep.
And it's just, I can't even explain how much I've learned in the facets of jiu-jitsu specifically. Obviously, being able to ask him an unlimited number of questions and be a part of helping him with his private lessons and all these different things allowed me to progress much quicker than normal. But I think also his emphasis on the fact that you have to learn how to teach something to truly be able to understand it, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
One big part of his whole thing when I was training, and then I started coaching the kids program, is that he wanted me to be a part of that program because it forced me to further understand what I'm actually doing. I'm lucky enough to be gifted athletically and mentally to kind of see things visually, see body movements, and be able to translate them myself pretty simply and pretty easily. But being able to do that doesn't then mean that I'm going to be able to break down what I actually did and teach it to somebody else. So what he, I think, did a really good job about doing with me specifically is making sure that he understood that I could pick things up super quickly and do it on my own, but slowing me down and making sure that I understood how to teach it to people as well. And that forced me to understand all of the minute details and translate that to other people who don't quite understand it as well as I do. And that made me so much better in jiu-jitsu specifically and directly translated into everything in life,
Yeah.
I started swimming recently and I'm doing a bunch of running and different things like that. And I feel as though a lot of physical things from the outside viewed inside are seen as just exertion and grit and different things like that. But there's so much mental technique and understanding body movements and how to do things efficiently and understanding things to a deeper level that allow you to make much larger jumps in progression than otherwise possible.
Can you give me a minute detail of what that is to you, or can you explain besides like,
What a
because I think
minute
it's
detail
interesting.
is?
Yeah, because like the grit, right?
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, yeah, work hard. It's the grit, man. You just got to like tough it out, and you got to remain consistency is one of them, right? Which is true. All of it is true. But what are the small, minor, like real details that add up to bigger things? You think that really, make the biggest difference in your game and in the realizations that you have when you're tweaking those, if you're transitioning into moves or anything.
It's a super complicated idea to explain in my head. I think, have you ever read Atomic Habits?
I have, yeah.
The book?
Yep.
Yeah. So that book, I think, does an amazing job at breaking things down to the smallest level. And obviously it's about developing discipline and consistency and showing you how adding these small building blocks spirals your habits into this big loop that allows you to progress things super quickly. I think what it has come down to for me specifically, the smallest detail in terms of everything that I do is attention to intention. So behind every movement that we make, whether it's in jiu-jitsu or in business or in school, whatever we're doing, whatever field that we're navigating, every move that we make, when done with intention, moves you much further than if it was just a sporadic, chaotic movement.
Right. If you're just there, right?
Yes.
Like on autopilot or something.
Somebody showing up and going autopilot, exactly. And that doesn't mean that there's not a place for that, right? I think that aside from physical energy, mental energy is one thing that I struggle with a lot in terms of maintaining at a high level because I'm doing so much all of the time. I'm much more mentally exhausted than I am physically exhausted at the end of the day because of how intellectualized my brain is and how much I'm thinking about different things and doing everything with intention, not trying to waste any time, any seconds. But it is important as well to sometimes just go through the motions and allow your brain to recover and different things like that. But I think that the smallest detail that has helped me in every facet of my life is doing things with intention, with a purpose, right? Not just moving to move. Sometimes you're in a place where you have to move, but every movement that you can make with intention and with understanding is going to put you so much further ahead than if you're just kind of throwing yourself out there chaotically.
Yeah.
You
the interesting part, since you brought up Atomic Habits, is that there's a quote in there. I'm going to butcher this like crazy, but then we don't fall to our goals. We fall to our systems. Yes. I think that's a really, really good one. Like if you want to make a change in like you said, business, BJJ, whatever, change the way your system is and not what the actual overall holistic goal is, right? If you can just do minor tweaks, then within your system of how you do things and your habits, then I think that goes a really long way, because that's what he talks about, right? Like atomic habits. It's like little minor changes within your system. And also, with the autopilot thing, I 100% like agree with you, right? Because personally for me, when I wake up in the morning, like I'm sure everyone else, I'm not like, fuck yeah, let's go to jiu-jitsu. I mean, we love jiu-jitsu, but I'm not like, fuck yeah, let's go every single day. You know what I mean?
100%.
And sometimes you're just scattered brained and brain fog. And no one even like in scientific terms knows where that comes from. Right? You can eat you can like optimize your eating, your rest. You could get like 8 hours of sleep that night. You could do everything right. And then you just wake up on the wrong side of the bed, which is like really, really weird. So yeah, I have to admit it that sometimes like I'm on straight autopilot, but I'll reframe it in my head and it's kind of like, yeah, I'm still here. You know what I mean? At least I still made it. But then, when you're on, right? Yeah, like there's those days too. 100%. It's kind of like, you're just like, and I personally know when I'm on, when I'm asking you to roll. I'm like, all right, dude, let's fucking do this.
It's game time, baby.
Game time.
Let's have some fun.
Yeah, like I'm going to get murked, but I got balls enough to like not have enough brain fog to go with the best of the best,
for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a weird like dynamic. I should actually say, how do you feel about, this is kind of a weird question, but how do you feel about like just life in general, waking up every day? And what I mean by that is a lot of people, they kind of drudge through when they wake up, you know what I mean? And not to pick on them, everyone is different, everyone's different phases of their life. I guess where I'm going with it is like just for you to give some tips, because for me, man, it took a while. I used to drown myself in alcohol, right? And a whole bunch of stuff. But that's because I didn't like my life. Like I didn't want to get up in the morning and be like, I wasn't excited for anything, I was like, fuck, I can't wait for the night to come so I could redo the whole thing over, right? Redo the process of getting like just shit faced and going out of my mind.
For sure.
So I guess what I'm trying to ask is, what advice for like the younger ages would you give to kind of like, I guess, better your life, man, to see things different and be excited to be waking up? Because I think that's where the majority of like substance abuse comes in, honestly. And I know it's genetic, right? Like we have a genetic predisposition.
Sure.
Sometimes our parents, and all that. What advice would you give for someone that's kind of down in the dumps and they feel like depressed and they feel like there's no hope?
I feel as though there's two approaches to it, right? The mainstream approaches are find this big goal that forces you to change your life. And then the opposite side is like the Atomic Habits, is find these small goals that allow you to better your life and facilitate them. The thing that has made me excited and continues to make me excited to wake up every single day and go out and give all of my effort is the goals that I have for my life. So right now I have this one big major goal of achieving this high-level military career, right? And what that has done is set the bar at a point to where my normal is already above the average person's normal. So I think that Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot too. Sitting down and figuring out what you want your life to look at like 5 or 10 years from now, finding a goal that allows you to achieve the picture that allows it to look like that. And then in the pursuit of that goal, it feels like a video game almost. Like you're excited to progress your character or your level towards this goal, and it allows you to get up and do the smaller things a little bit easier. You know, I think for me specifically, the higher the goal is, the easier it is for me to do all of these stupid, small, silly things that a lot of people don't like to do. You know, it's inconvenient, it's tedious, it is what it is. But in my head, it's like, I want to do this. There's no way I'm going to complain about doing this, you know? So again, it's reframing the way that I enjoy my life. I think that from somebody who's already in like the crap of things and really in the dump and really in a tough mental spot, I think it's okay to start small, right? Let's wake up and make our bed every day, you know, in the morning, or wake up and brush my teeth. Or Jordan Peterson again talks about this all the time. It's like, if the biggest goal or the biggest thing that you can do throughout the week to make your life a little bit better is vacuum your room once, man. It's like, sometimes you got to start small. But what I would suggest is once people get up and going and they're just living life, let's say you're just living life normally, you don't feel like you really have any meaning or you don't really have anywhere to go and you're kind of just like the average Joe, find something that inspires you and something that you enjoy doing and try to make a life out of it. You know, I feel like the pursuit of that is what gives life so much meaning. Success or not, you know, it's pursuing something that you feel as though is greater than you allows the smaller things to be much more simplistic, and you become a lot less, you complain a lot less, you become a lot more grateful for the things around you. And yeah, I think that's the biggest thing for me. It's an eye opener, and it's unfortunate that America's at this spot where we have so much and take advantage of so much. We don't understand what it's like to live a difficult life. Yeah. You know, go anywhere else in the world, any third world country, experience any of that, and you're going to feel like an asshole for complaining about some of the things that we complain about, you know?
For sure.
And that's super convicting for me specifically, just because I've seen a lot of crazy things, and when people complain about silly things, it definitely frustrates me. I worked at Starbucks for like 3 months, and dealing with the level of entitlement that comes with someone that wants their coffee the perfect way or different things like that, with my perspective and in my head, knowing what the world's like and knowing what people are going through, it was impossible for me to maintain sanity working in that job. And I had to quit that job. You know, there was no way that I was going to entertain that anymore, because it was unbeneficial for my mental health along with everything else that's going on, you know?
Yeah.
So widening your perspective, I think, is a super good idea as well, and realize how much you have to be grateful for, because we take advantage of a lot and take a lot for granted. And I feel like sometimes people need a kick in the ass too, you know, when they're in the crap of things. You know, you're complaining about simple things. Sometimes a kick in the ass will get you going too.
Yeah,
so.
Which leads me, you know, the interesting thing that you said there is just the people that you're around just in general, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. It's not necessarily your friends that you're around, but then just your environment. Mm-hmm. Because when you have a bunch of entitled complainers, victim mentality, I want this in my coffee, this is wrong, remake it again, whatever. Mm-hmm. Here's one of them, is that not that you'll fall into that, but it kind of slowly seeps into you, right? Yep. Like, even though you're not like that, even though you're as disciplined as you are, it almost goes into your subconscious when you hear it all. If you have to hear that shit all day, you can't help but turn into your environment, right? Mm-hmm. Even though it's probably not going to happen, and you know, because you are who you are at the end of the day.
Right.
But dude, when I hear complaining like that, whether it's at the workplace or just in general, I have to assume that if I listen to that enough times, I'm going to be that. And I'd rather die. Right. Honestly, right? Like, to be able to complain and get myself into, you know, the quote unquote victim mindset of that. So leading up to that, that's another philosophy. I'll give you mine. And I've said it time and time and again in this podcast, and I will have it on my gravestone, is that you are who you hang out with.
Oh yeah. Average of the top 5 people that you hang out with the most. Yep. 100%.
Exactly. And that relates to kind of like our gym, right? Mm-hmm. That's why I have so many people from our gym, because for the most part, they're so consistent. they love to do what they are. I mean, they're socially intact, right? They're like the people that I've had on here. If you go down the list, it's almost like, yeah, they got something to say. As far as something good to say, you can have a conversation with them. That's why I have them on here. And they're very, just like you, very, very aware of like just having mindless, not that small talk is bad,
sure.
right? It's part of societal norms to have. You got to play the nicety part, but yeah, they, for the most part, they're punctual, right? They show up on time. They just show up, and that's a big part of it. So that's like really my point, is that at the end of the day, dude, show me someone that's around bars and clubs, which I used to be. That's how I know.
Right.
And dude, I'll show you someone that's like not going anywhere.
Right.
And I can say that with conviction.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of like, wait, what'd you do? It's kind of like, yeah, I was. People are easy to read. People are just easy to read, and I know you know that, right?
Yeah, to an extent, though. I think that there's a limit to it. So this is what I was going to add on in terms of like the level of entitlement. A part of me gets really frustrated with those people, and a part of me is curious as to how much they actually know that they have that other people don't. I think that we suffer from a big wave of ignorance and people lacking an understanding. And it makes me feel bad because I had a much harder time with this a couple years ago. But my close friends, I want the absolute best for them, and I want them to succeed far greater than I can if I can make that happen, right? And so I would find myself in situations where I'm beating myself up mentally and emotionally because they're making these decisions that I feel as though would harm them more than they would benefit them, right? And I'm just voicing my opinion, and I'm like, yo, I think that you should do this, man. I don't think that going out this weekend's the greatest idea. You got an exam on Monday or whatever, simple things. And I invested a lot of time and energy into that. And so what I learned through conversations with different people and with conversations with Jerry is it's like, especially when you have big goals yourself, like you said, control the controllables. I don't have that much control over them.
Yeah.
And it's much more beneficial for me to lead by example than to just kind of shove things down their throat. Because unknowingly, I was probably being more of a nuisance than a help by harping on them all the time. Because I want the best for them, right?
Sure.
The intentions are good, but you can't help someone who doesn't want to help themselves, right?
100%.
And learning that not only has made my mind more peaceful, but also made me more empathetic to other people in terms of it sucks that you have this mindset and this perspective on the world. I can give my two-piece, right? Give you a little bit of information and kind of help better your day, but it sucks that some people just don't want the understanding. They want to be stuck in ignorance. They think that ignorance is bliss, which it's not, and it makes it unfortunate because I'm learning more and more as I get older and the more people that I meet that the average person really doesn't want to do much with their life. They want to just kind of get by, and they don't want to have to take on all this responsibility because they feel as though it's easier to just kind of coast. And I mean, if that's what gets them through life and what makes them happy, more power to them, but I had to realize that the goals that I have in life are not common, right? So I have to make sure that I'm not trying to hold everyone around me to the standard that I hold myself to. I'm a lot harder on myself than I need to be on other people. And it's definitely helped my relationships a bunch. I've never had like relationship problems with my buddies or anything like that. But there's a power to knowing, for them to know that you have the best intentions for them, but then not trying to control their every move,
Yeah, that a light bulb just clicked because interestingly enough, when we were talking earlier, remember how we were saying on the other side of that, when people get mad and they don't listen to what other people have to say, it's more of a projection on them, on their insecurities. Well, I'd probably like to call that, like, say if you kind of give someone advice that doesn't want it, right? Even though it's for the good, it's almost like a toxic positivity kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
It's almost the other way around too.
For sure.
It's almost like or anyone that's trying to do good or tell someone advice with good intention.
Yeah.
it's like you're projecting yourself on them. It's almost like, yeah, do this, man, do this. But it's like, wait a minute. When I was, 25, and if I would have said, hey, if I went back to I'm 39 now, I went back to my 25-year-old self that was drinking all the time, I'd be like, hey, you should probably do this to set yourself up for success. My 25-year-old self would be like, go fuck yourself, dude.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I was who I was at that time.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have been like, 30 years down the line, I want to be good at martial arts. I want to make this much money or have a goal in myself. You're kind of like in this box at that time.
Yeah.
So it's almost like when we tell, friends that, because 100%. And I think it's more of a like guy psychology thing too, to be able to like try to solve problems.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
solving.
We're problem
logic
solving.
oriented. Yeah.
But people don't want to hear that shit. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Some of us,
100%.
a lot of people don't want to hear that.
Yeah. I think that what I've began to do is like, if you're really close to me, I'll tell you once, maybe twice, my opinion on something simplistically, not trying to force it on you in terms of like, if you're making a silly decision, and then I'll let it be. Like, you do you, man. When I'll go deeper into things now is if they come to me for help. That's different. I feel as though that's an invitation and them asking for more input. I had a really bad habit of wanting the best for them more than they wanted it for themselves. That's what it comes down to, is just, and then I have to realize too that the unfortunate part about life is the majority of people that I meet will come in and then come out of my life.
Right.
People will pass through. Not everyone's here to stay for good. And if I want
very little, right?
Yeah,
like
very,
you start to realize very little. Like it's crazy.
I'm only 21 and I can't even tell you how many people that have came in. I'm like, yo, this guy's dope, and he disappeared.
Yeah.
I can only imagine what it is for you guys, and especially when you guys have been in this environment so much longer than I have. It's wild to think about, and it's wild to experience. But at the same time, it excites me because there's so much more life to be lived. I feel as though the 21 years that I have lived, I've had so much fun and so many experiences and such a good time. And I'm still, in my opinion, in the intro to life. I haven't been able to start the career that I'm pursuing or anything like that yet. I got one semester left till I'm done with college. Most people don't even, I feel, get started with their life until they're in their 30s.
Yeah. That's
especially
very true.
the future generation. So like, I feel as though I've had such an awesome life and so much fun already, and I'm just getting started. So I get more and more excited, the more I think about it. But to the credit of people who are getting started later in life, don't think that just because you're getting started later means that you should be less excited about it, because starting is better than not starting at all.
Yeah.
The hardest belt to get in jiu-jitsu is the white belt. Walking through the door and then actually starting the progression through all the different things in life is the most difficult part. Some people start later than others, and it is what it is. I've been blessed to get my mind opened early on and get to make the most of it. But just because you're in a rough spot now, just because you're behind the bar, even though you wouldn't be starting even 10 years older than me, get going, man. It's going to be fun. Life's worth living. You've been given one life. The mathematical odds of you being born in the first place are slim to none. Enjoy the one that you have. You get dealt a hand. You have these cards. Play the cards to your best of your ability. Everyone can have some fun, man. There are so many people that are quadriplegic and different things like that make so much out of their life. A lot of us are ungrateful for the simple things and take those for granted. You can have so much fun. I'm telling you, it's so awesome.
Absolutely. And I don't mean to be grim or anything, because I want to relate to saying that a bunch of people, this is out now, but I recently got diagnosed with cancer. And here's the thing about that. Here's the point I want to make about that, is that when you're faced like that, we can say all the philosophies that we want, right? And everything else. But then when you have to face that very, very serious thing, you better walk the fucking walk and live the way that, like what you just said, right? Like some people are paraplegic. And for me, the way I'm thinking about it is that there might not be a tomorrow. Right. And I know that's cliche to say for a lot of people, but when you're in the midst of kind of facing that, it's almost like, oh shit. It's like, oh, you really gotta fucking live the way that what's right for you. Like saying the principles of, You have to do things that's in your control now. You have to make the most of things. Just start, have no regrets. And part of the reason, even before, the diagnosis, that's why I started this podcast, right? Because I didn't want to, I learned this later in life, but then if there's anything, I don't want to regret anything in life. Right. Long story short, like there's a few milestones that I could think about, which if I just say, again, not to be grim, but then if I were to just be out by tomorrow, right? If I were to exit this planet tomorrow, I'd be like, oh, I got to take care of my mom with Alzheimer's. I had the privilege to do that. I had the privilege to take care of that guy upstairs, my dad. He's, getting fragile and weak. And to me, I come from a place of like family, as far as like old school family values, take care of each other. Yeah, that's the top of my value system. And, along with other friends, right? Like your true friends that what we talked about that don't come along every often because someone will come along and then they'll dip out. For sure. Like that's why there's only a few of them that you learn out. But yeah, I think that's the whole point is that when you're faced with something real, right? You learn to like live that way. You learn to like the philosophies that we were talking about. You learn to do things that's in your control. The people that you surround yourself with, those are all within your control, man. Yeah. So yeah, it's just, man, there is a lot of like nuggets in this conversation for sure. But my whole point is that, yeah, man, what you just pointed out, go do what you're going to do, man, because life's not entitled. You're not entitled to this life. We all just happen to come here. We were born, we woke up, and then we get all these sensory input experiences, right? We see things, and then that's it. It's like make the most of it, like you said. Yeah, man. What are some other important advice that you would have, like just at a young age again? Because I think that is the whole point of this podcast is that you're how old are you now, Cory? 21. I've known you 17 since you were like 17.
Yeah, 4 years.
Yeah, 4 years. And from 17 to 21, before we end this, because we have a few minutes, what other philosophies, principles, nuggets have you learned from BJJ to just life in general that you can kind of give to the world and give some advice?
Above everything else, man, be consistent with whatever you want to succeed at. Whether your consistency is twice a week, 3 days a week, twice a day, whatever you can get it in, whether you want to do it or not. As you know, and as a lot of the people know, I went from white to brown belt in less than 4 years. And crazy. It wasn't like I'm some special human being.
By the way, sorry, for the people, I know that, I have people on here that we train with, and then we often kind of, we all train, and that's a product of Jerry, because we do all those rounds, and I love, like I said, time and time again, he's been on here, and I love like his program and the way he teaches, and we're a product of that, right? It's almost like let's go, go, and the way he teaches. But for you in particular, man, that's what it is around the gym. It's like you got to a point so quickly, you improved your game so fucking quickly that it is a little bit. Not a little bit, but an outlier almost to get good that fast. Like even the best of the best that train don't get good that fast. And we know a lot of them. I mean, there's a lot of people that train, but you're different. What are some things that, can really help you out, just like the path you took to get good very quickly? You said consistent, right?
I truly think that it was just consistency. I think that obviously I got some predispositions to pick things up rather quickly. I've always been super successful in school and sports, and whatever I've decided to do, I've gotten pretty good at pretty quick. But I think, again, it has to do with, like I said, I'm kind of extreme in terms of when I find something interesting, I kind of dive into it, into the deep end right away, and really get fully involved and fully immersed into it. I simply put my extreme success and my fast progression in jiu-jitsu, and just from my jump in life from 17 to 21 in general, it's a night and day difference. I was 146 pounds, now I'm 180 pounds. I got a bunch of different things going on. I've really changed my life. And it's not like my life was bad at the time. You know, I was a 17-year-old kid. But I think these last 4 years, what they've shown me is that if you pick something and you're consistent with it as often as you can be. And again, I was blessed to be able to be consistent with jiu-jitsu twice a day, every day, 5 to 6 days a week for 4 years. And that led to my progression so quickly. I think I've probably have more mat hours than most of the people in the gym. And that's just because I was able to have that much mat time. But regardless of how much time that you have, if you can be consistent with the time that you can put towards something, you're going to end up reaching a point where if you weren't consistent, let's say there's this one person and there's this is the other version of you, right? This is the consistent version. This is the inconsistent version. At the beginning, it's not going to be that much of a difference. Fast forward 7 or 8 years, eventually this person is going to be so much further ahead than this person that this person could never catch up even if they wanted to.
It's the compound interest, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, exponential growth.
It's a spiral upward. And the scary part about that is your life can spiral downward in the exact same way. So building those good habits and making sure that the foundation of your life is stable prevents those crazy downward spirals. It takes one bad decision. It takes a DUI. It takes trying drugs for the first time. It takes making simple, small, stupid decisions to throw everything that you have in a loop back down as well. So you have to be super careful and be mindful of that. And I think that has been also a great motivator in keeping me just on the path that I'm on. And again, find something you love, man. If you love it and then you can be consistent with it even when you don't love it, you're going to be top 1% easily. Unfortunately, it's really easy to be top 1% nowadays. And
the bar is set piss low.
Yeah,
pretty low. Top 1% is one thing, but let's go like 10%. It's pretty fucking piss low. You know, I heard this a statistic just for fun that if you do 10 push-ups every day, you're past like 100 million men in as far as fitness.
Yeah, that's crazy to me.
That's
wild.
Fucking 100 million men.
Yeah.
I know there's 7 billion people on the planet, but 100 million men just doing the bare minimum of 10 push-ups. What in the, that is crazy.
Yep. Yeah. It's unfortunate in the aspect that the majority of our world is in a spot where they could be doing much better, but it's cool in the fact that it could serve as an inspiration to those who want to do better. It's like, this is the time, let's lock in, let's make your life better. And then in progression with everyone else, make everyone else's life is better too. Cause you're not, Jordan Peterson again talks about this too. We're individuals, right? We have our individual lives, but we're also a network node in this world where we have all of these different connections and everything that we do does expand out, Let's say I talk to one person and that talks to another person. Eventually it fans out. Something that you said could have reached 100,000 to 1 million people fairly quickly, just based on the connection that you have. So you making yourself better isn't just for you, but for everyone else around you as well. You can make such an impact on other people and makes people's lives so much better just by making yourself better.
Absolutely. Again, with this podcast, I used to think it was, woo-ha stuff like, you have to, I thought it was just something that people said, in order to hide the fact that they want to get famous or make all this money. But they always said that do something because you have a purpose to it. And that's serving other people, like helping people out. The more and more I do this podcast, actually, I'm there now, is that, get it out into the world. Just like our conversation today. We live it sometimes, it's kind of like looking at the mirror and getting fit. It's almost like you think there's no change. Sometimes it's kind of like, oh, well, fuck, I'm not like...
For sure.
It's like...
I'm going backwards today. What's going on?
Exactly, yeah.
For
It's
sure.
just like projection of your own self. But then, dude, some of the things that you have said on this podcast, it is, especially in your age group, and even the older guys that are kind of lost in their mid-30s, like we were talking about the midlife crisis. I mean, when they hear a guy like you on this podcast, even just changing one perspective, I mean, dude, it feels so good. I say this all the time in the gym too. Like, when Oscar was like, oh yeah, that episode where you talked about alcoholism, it really helped me out and stuff like that. I was like, when he said that was the most amazing thing I've ever, and that's how I knew I was doing the right thing, doing this, because stuff like this, as you notice, we'll talk about BJJ, but again, it's more of a self-improvement, philosophical. I think that will help more people out, especially in the age of, mental what do you call this? Mental health, right? You hear a lot about mental health, and it's just kind of like, I know there's fine lines to that, kind of like, yeah, I need a mental day off. I don't know,
For sure.
you could,
Yeah,
and I get it. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of nuggets on here, very practical advice that people can use with just a guy like you, just 21, doing big things in his life, got to white to brown belt at a ridiculous level, a ridiculous pace, and a good listener, very, very self-aware. And yeah, man, any last words before, we kind of ended? Anything you want to say?
I guess the last thing would be in terms of progressing, back to the thing that we said about like, sometimes you look in the mirror and it's like, oh, I'm doing worse today or I'm going backwards. The thing about progressing in anything, but in life in general, is it's never a steady upward, right? There's always going to be those ups and downs. So take those pitfalls as an opportunity to motivate you to get back up out of the hole, rather than to allow you to begin that spiral down. Jiu-jitsu, we have our up days. We have a month where we're just not doing great, and then you come back out the other side, even higher up on the spectrum. It's a game of consistency. It's not about who can do it the quickest, who can do it the best all the time. It's you stay consistent. The overarching chart will be upwards, but there's always those micro up and downs the entire time, and don't let those demotivate you. That's the biggest thing that's helped me, man. It's even when things suck, keep on going, you'll end up on there.
Yep, I'll definitely second that 100%. With, the Rocky quote. It's not how hard you get hit, it's how much you could get back up, or, how often you could get back up. And yeah, that's where exponential growth comes in business or in investing. Those are the ones that get quote unquote paid, is that they can outlast long enough. And a quote that I heard is that if you don't, this is literal, if you don't quit, you can't lose, right? If you just keep going and you sustain that, you don't quit the game, how can you lose? You haven't quit. You just keep going. So, yeah, man, I appreciate you having taken the time to come on, man.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
You.